edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. We are kicking off the podcast with the NFL's Week 4 action in a segment that we call Show Me the Money Lines, where we take a look at some of the weekend's NFL money lines and give you our betting picks. We begin with an early contest as the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Detroit Lions. Kansas City a minus 290 favorite. The Lions available at plus 245 odds. Taylor, can the Chiefs hand the Lions their first loss of the year, or will Detroit do just that to KC?
Yeah, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs until they give me a reason to. So far, they haven't. The Lions, it's cool that they're undefeated. They tied the Cardinals in a game they absolutely should have won. They beat a slow-starting Charger team, and they beat an Eagles team that could easily be 0-3. So I'm not overly impressed to this point. It's good that they're where they are, but I think they're in for a dose of reality this week. Patrick Mahomes has thrown for like 1,200 yards with 10 touchdowns in 3 games without an interception. He's unfair. The Lions can always rise up and shock the world, but like I said, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs until they give me a reason to do that.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy to have there. Detroit has surprised many people, many pundits and fans and bettors, because they were underdogs the last 2 games they had, and I think they were close to even against Arizona in week 1. So it's not like anybody's out there saying, oh, Detroit's a good team, give Detroit respect. Then they got to play arguably the second best team in the NFL this weekend. Even though it's at home, they don't match up well with the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think they're going to be able to slow down that offense. And I don't think they're going to be able to score as many points. I'm curious to see how much they open up the offense against an average at best Chiefs defense. Like, I think Detroit has some weapons to put up some points. But come on now. They're not going to score 35, 40 points with the Chiefs. You got to go Kansas City here.
Yeah, I'm going to take KC also. Mahomes, by the way, now a member of the 99 overall club with Madden in Madden 2020. That may even seem like he might be, I know that they don't do 100 overall players. They may have done that once with someone in the mid-2000s. But, he's outstanding. Detroit is, maybe overachieving is a good word for them. But Kansas City is doing exactly what we expected. The Chiefs are one of the best teams in the NFL. KC should pick up the win. So we're all going to pick the Chiefs for this one. Next up, the disappointing Cleveland Browns face the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore a minus 300 favorite compared to Cleveland's plus 250 underdog status. Rick, you weren't a believer in either of these teams heading into the season. So who do you think gets the win here as they go head-to-head?
I love this whole drama they got going on about Baker Mayfield being overrated. Personally, I do think he's overrated. He hasn't proven anything as of now in the NFL. Rex Ryan's criticism of him on Monday was phenomenal. I even found it hysterical that Baker Mayfield had some comments back for Rex Ryan. But look at this. They got killed in week 1 versus the Titans, who are a 500 team. Then, they played well against the Rams, but in the end, they didn't have what the Jets with a third-string quarterback with a terrible offensive line, without their best defender. They haven't proved anything this season. The Ravens, okay, they've surprised me, and I think they've surprised other people with how well that offense has been clicking. But come on, they played the Cardinals and the Dolphins their first 2 games, and they go to Kansas City and lose. Yeah, they made it competitive for a while. Kansas City pulled ahead by several scores and then let them back in the game as well. I'm not sold on either team here. I think Baltimore will win. I think they have the defense to pressure Mayfield, to shut down Landry and Odell. I think they have the running game to smash Cleveland. I think Lamar Jackson is going to outplay Baker Mayfield. And I think this overhyped, overrated train and criticism for Mayfield is going to keep going and going until he actually takes them to the playoffs, which won't be this year. Sorry, Taylor. I know they're your team.
I'm not a Baker Mayfield defender, but I think the play calling hasn't really done him any favors at this point. That draw on 4th and 9 against the Rams was like the worst play call I've ever seen in my entire life. So maybe he wants to get a head coach that knows what he's doing that can actually kind of make some headway in the division. But I don't see any reason to pick them here. They could easily be 0-3 if Sam Darnold didn't have mono starting in week 2. So Baltimore, like you said, made the game a little bit closer toward the end last week. It made the score look a little better than it probably should have, but I still don't see much reason to pick against them. This is another game on their schedule that I think is going to just pad their schedule without actually being that impressive of a victory. But again, nothing we've seen from Cleveland has me wanting to pick them. So it's kind of like the Chiefs, where they'll give me a reason to bet for them or bet on them when they actually show it. So still waiting on that.
I'm going to pick the Cleveland Browns to win this week, and I can tell you the reason why. I wanted to see what Rick would do when I picked the Cleveland Browns this week. Just because I know that he's going to have some kind of over-the-top reaction. Disappointed a little bit on that, but he was a little bit subdued, waiting for my logic, I think, behind it. This is realistically, though, this would be why I would take Cleveland this week. This is the last time this season that I would be willing to bet on the Browns to win a game if they don't win this week. If they don't win this week, there is not a game left on their schedule where they're going to be worth it on an odds line, on a money line, to place a wager. This is it. This is the end of it. It's either, for me, this is either they are a team that might actually do something this year, that might at least try to be like an 8-8 squad, or they're going to be 3-13, and I'm going to ignore them entirely unless they're playing a great team and lock in the other side. So for me, this is basically me going, hey, I'm going to put a little bit down on this game. I'm going to pick Cleveland. When they prove me wrong and Baltimore ends up winning this game, I'm never betting on the Browns again this year. That's basically the way I go with it. Because I do agree with Taylor, though. If they get a different head coach, because a draw play on 4th and 9 isn't something I would have ever tried in Madden. I don't know how that was supposed to work. That is that made no sense. That made no sense.
I thought it was 3rd and 9 and didn't realize it was 4th and 9. But even then, even on 3rd and 9, it's a horrible call. So
3rd and 9.
I think he thought they had Barry Sanders in the backfield or something, because that was a terrible play call. But then again, it's not like their offense was, playing great the whole game. They've had their ups and downs. I think the Rams really let Cleveland stay around that game. And the Rams coaching offensive play calling wasn't great either. They didn't do enough to get Todd Gurley involved, who's arguably their main weapon on offense. And Sean McVay has come out recently and says he needs to get Gurley more involved. So I think, although that play calling was terrible, I don't think that's what lost the game. I think the fact that Baker Mayfield is not a winner yet. He's not a proven winning quarterback in this league yet, where he can take the team down and win at the end of the game against a good team. He can do it against the Bengals or the Steelers this year because they're terrible. But come on now, against a team like the Rams, he played the Titans and got embarrassed. Like, by the end of the season, this overrated thing is going to be huge.
We'll see on that. Still a lot of football to be played this year. A lot of early season in-division games for teams in the NFC North. We've seen a few already. And this week, the Minnesota Vikings visit the Chicago Bears. The Bears can be had at -130, while the Vikes carry +110 odds. Taylor, which 2-1 team will move to 3-1 and pick up their first in-division win of the season?
I was pretty bullish on the Vikings before the season, but I'm not that impressed with what I've seen so far. Kirk Cousins hasn't looked very good at all since coming to Minnesota. I think the Bears defense is going to make him beat them, and I'm not sure that's something that bodes well for the Vikings' chances. I like Chicago at home here. Not that I'm in love with Mitchell Trubisky either, but I think their defense has performed better to this point in general, and I just don't trust Kirk Cousins right now, so I'll just take Chicago at home.
Did Kirk Cousins forget how to play quarterback? Like, this is terrible. He's making Josh Allen look like a top 10 quarterback in this league. That's how bad Cousins playing. And you know what? His counterpart, Trubisky, finally had one good game, and it comes against one of the worst teams in the league, and we're supposed to be like, oh, the Bears are back, the Bears are back. That defense forced all those turnovers, scored a touchdown, which could have won the game itself if they needed to, because Trubisky and the offense wasn't doing anything. Where did their running game go? Why do they always have to do like gadget plays instead of just letting Montgomery line up in the backfield and pummeling the defensive line with what was supposed to be a great offensive line? It's ridiculous. They outthink themselves, they outcoach themselves, and they put Trubisky in a position to succeed, and he doesn't. he is not this great quarterback that people were trying to praise him as coming into the season. Year 3 does not look good for Trubisky. He looks like he's regressed, just like Kirk Cousins. What is he, like year 8 and year 7 in this league? He looks like he's regressed. Like, how do you forget playing quarterback on such a talented team? So now this game's in Chicago. You have 2 quarterbacks that are playing below average football for that position, especially with the expectations. And like Taylor said, that Bears defense is going to force Kirk Cousins to beat him. They're going to take away the run, and they're going to put pressure on Cousins all day. Green Bay did that to him, and they made him look like he was a high school quarterback. I think Chicago will do the same thing. I think Chicago's going to win this game, but not because of Trubisky. Trubisky will do everything he can to keep the Vikings in the game. This is going to be an ugly game. It's going to be one of those black and blue games because that's what this division is known for. But come on now. You can't be excited about either team's chances right now with how poor the quarterbacks are looking.
Yeah, this is a really tough one for me to pick because, I kind of second what Rick was saying about Mitch Trubisky is that I'm not really excited about him. I so much about this makes me want to be like, oh, no, Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, the way he's been going, it's got to be Chicago. And then you look at Chicago's offense and you go, well, probably not, maybe not, who knows. Standard line, if you're doing a coin toss with a casino, is -110. This game is being played in Chicago. 20 points movement on a money line seems to me like that is probably just what it's worth to play at Soldier Field if you're a Bears team. This just basically looks like it's a coin toss game because -130 for a Bears team at home against +110 for any team on the road shows me that basically these two teams should be considered to be equal. I'm back and forth on this one. I like marked down Minnesota for a bit. I've leaned towards Chicago in the last couple of hours of just looking at it, but just to change it up, I'm going to go Minnesota. I don't know on this one, honestly. Both of these teams could lose. I'm going to take a tie, $1 on a tie at plus 3,000 odds if we can find it. That would be my wager on this game because they're both going to try to lose and neither will be successful at pulling it off entirely. Last one for Show Me the Money Lines as the New Orleans Saints host the Dallas Cowboys. Each of these teams enter this week leading their respective divisions. The Cowboys still undefeated at 3-0. And this Sunday Night Football game has them Cowboys favored at -135 with the Saints at +115 underdogs. Rick, will Dallas move to 4-0 after Sunday night's game in the Superdome?
This is actually a tough call here because if the Saints did not do what they just did last week in Seattle, everybody would be like, Dallas is going to go down there and win. But the Saints just did what they did. They went in there when nobody thought they would win, and they defeated Seattle. And they were up big for a while there. Like, they were smashing Seattle until they allowed Seattle to score some late scores and try and, close the gap. This week they're back at home. It's usually a place where they have the advantage. I was not impressed with what Dallas did when they were on the road versus Washington. Week 2? I was not impressed with what they did last week against Miami, like 10-6 in the third quarter. I mean, come on now. So now they're heading to play the Saints, who look like they got some mojo back. Defense is playing okay. Their offense got going with Bridgewater. I'm going to take the Saints. First of all, I hate the Cowboys, but I can recognize that they're going to be a playoff team this year. But I have to go with the Saints here. Until the Cowboys play and beat a winning team, you have to go with the Saints at home. They beat the Giants, they beat Washington, and they beat Miami. Okay? Only one win between those 3 teams. That's not an impressive resume. Yes, Prescott's look good. The offenses look good. The defenses look average. But they're playing against the worst teams in the league. Come on now. I'm taking it. I just talked myself even more into it. The Saints, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Dallas is probably the best team in that division, clearly to this point. But like you said, they haven't really played anybody. The Saints' win last week was a little bit fluky. I think they had a kick return and a defensive touchdown in the game, which kind of ran up the score a little bit and inflated the numbers. But if I were betting on this, I would still take the Saints as a home dog just because the value's there and the game is pretty much a toss-up. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is much of a downgrade from Drew Brees at this point of their respective careers, which is part of why I wrote a couple weeks ago that the injury is not a death knell for the Saints. They can still get into the Super Bowl mix, especially once he does come back. So I think they can keep their head above water. I think they can win this game. There's no reason they can't. I don't think Dallas is some juggernaut, even though they have been, impressive in terms of final scores through the first 3 weeks. I just think that I would take the value, and the values with the Saints.
I agree with you. The Saints at home as a money line underdog is good value. The Cowboys haven't proven it to me that they are as legitimate as their record indicates. The fact that they let the Dolphins hang around a little bit last week is, the three of us just playing 3 on 11 could probably, put the Dolphins away a little earlier than they did, especially if we were in front of a home crowd. But, I'm just going to take New Orleans also on that one. And with that, let's move over to our Picking Favorites segment, where we look at the games involving our favorite teams. All three of us have made picks for all three of these games. We're going to show you those picks in a minute, but we're going to have each of us break down our personal favorite NFL team's game and pick a winner before we move on to the next. For me, that is sadly the Miami Dolphins, who are only 15.5-point underdogs at home against the 1-2 Los Angeles Chargers, who just got Melvin Gordon back. He just reported to the facility. Haven't seen yet if he's going to play or not this week. Either way, the Chargers are going to win this game. As far as the last week, I basically had said that if you want to give up 24, 25 points in that game to Dallas, if a casino would give you better odds on that on a friendlier to the casino spread to do it, the numbers I provided would have been pretty spot on as far as that goes. I think the Cowboys only put one more point than that in their win. 15.5 to me seems pretty good. I would maybe consider 16.5 at this point. I could see a 17-point number that's nice and round. It's a nice football score. But, yeah, especially if Melvin Gordon can even play 5 snaps. But either way, I know the Chargers are 1-2. The Dolphins are brutal winless right now. They're terrible. There's going to be a game where I might pick them, and it's going to be coming up relatively soon on the schedule, I do believe. I'd have to double check that, but this is not the week. The Chargers are going to win this game. I'm not picking the Dolphins, and I would still even say, again, I could see LA winning by 17, if not more in this situation. Taylor's favorite team, the Houston Texans, who are 4.5-point favorites at home against the Cam Newton-less Carolina Panthers. Taylor, break it down for us. Give us your pick for this game.
It could be the homer in me, but I think the spread looks a little bit small. The Texans are at home. Carolina's obviously down Cam Newton. Kyle Allen looked good last week. He led them to a win in Arizona, but again, it was in Arizona against the Cardinals. I'm not really ready to anoint him after that game. The Texans went into LA and beat the Chargers. Deshaun Watson got sacked just twice, which I think was huge. Obviously, if they can keep him upright, I think they have a good chance to actually make some noise this season. I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or if it was just an anomaly, but if they can, keep the Carolina defense out of the backfield, I think they can win this game. I think they can cover the spread, and I will pick them to do both.
Finally, for Rick, his favorite would be the 3-0 Buffalo Bills, who are about to come to a screeching halt as the 7-point underdogs at home against the New England Patriots. Rick, are you ready to admit that the undefeated run to open the season is coming to an end, or are the Bills going to somehow beat the Pats?
I absolutely hate the NFL schedule makers for this. They can't even let Buffalo enjoy an undefeated run for a while. We don't even get through the first month of football before we have to play the team that has basically owned us for 15 years. This is very frustrating, but it's also an opportunity as a measuring stick to see where this young team is heading. They have a lot of good pieces. They're one of only 4 teams with a top 10 defense, and I think it's a top 10 overall offense because they're 5th in the league in rushing. And so they have the ability. One thing, and I think I mentioned this to you before we filmed earlier this week, they let the Bengals back in that game, and that was a little concerning for me because they were flat out dominating in every aspect of that game: defense, offense, special teams, coaching, everything. And then it's like they just took the third quarter off and let Cincinnati come back and take the lead in late fourth quarter. Yes, Buffalo was able to get the game-winning drive, win the game, and so forth and so forth. But still, they shouldn't have even let that happen. I like the confidence they've got going from the first 3 weeks, but now they're playing the best team in football. Brady's only lost to them a couple times. Like, everything lines up to where New England's going to get another win in Buffalo. My hope is that the Bills can keep it to below 10 points if they lose, which is more likely that they will. But, we've seen miracles before. And, we lightning strikes twice sometimes. People win the Powerball lottery and become billionaires. I mean, these things do happen. So who knows? It could happen this weekend. I will say this, though. I do think Miami will get a win later this year. I think they'll beat Washington at home or Cincinnati at home. One of those two they can get late in November and December. And for what Taylor said, Houston doesn't even have a running game. Carolina's going to smash it. So I'd like to deflect from my Bills to your teams and just move on to the next segment.
Let's do that with a little give me props. We start in the NFL, where there's a posted prop bet about whether or not Antonio Brown will play in the NFL again, either this year or in 2020. The yes is available at plus 200, the no at minus 300. Taylor, will AB get back into an NFL lineup by the end of next season?
It's really tough. I could see a team talking themselves into it. If someone has an injury or someone leaves as a free agent, I think it kind of depends on how this legal case goes. Maybe if that gets settled or dismissed or something, then he becomes less toxic. Maybe a team does that. But it's not even just the legal problems, I think, that are keeping teams away. It's the fact that he's a complete lunatic, apparently. He had all that drama with the Raiders before the accusation even came out. Obviously, he signed with the Patriots before that. If you're too toxic for the Patriots, I think you're probably too toxic for everybody else too. So I would lean toward no. He's kind of gone scorched earth a little bit on Twitter over the last week or two since the Patriots cut him, I guess a week. But it's tough. The NFL doesn't really have any scruples. If a team thinks he can help them, then I think they could sign him on. But as of now, which does not mean tomorrow I'll feel the same way, I would still lean toward no.
Yeah, I flip-flopped on that too as I was writing an article about it. And it's hard because I think he's hot garbage. I'm not a fan of him as a human being at all. And I just think, like you said, toxic is an understatement. With that said, this is the NFL where they prove that talent trumps troubles. And even though you can point to the fact that the Raiders of all teams couldn't handle him, and then the Patriots couldn't keep him motivated to stay on the right track, being the defending Super Bowl champs and the best team in the league, he will get back on a team. The only question is, will it be by the end of this year or the beginning of next year? And the reason is he has way too much talent. There's nothing that has showed on-field decline. He still looks like one of the best receivers in the league. He can still do his job from the slot like nobody else. He can still perform on the field. And if that's the case, a team that's making a run for the playoffs or has a serious injury and already locked in a position in the playoffs, he would be a perfect addition to it. It all comes down to this. It's the NFL's investigation. And they're probably waiting to see what's going to happen with the civil suit and any other issues that might come up. If there's no suspension, then I think we'll hear a few teams will definitely pursue him. His agent just said either today or yesterday that there are teams still interested, but nobody's going to sign him until they know if he's going to be suspended or not by the league, first of all. Second of all, I think they also want to see some kind of actions where he takes responsibility for what he's done, because it's hard to be like, well, let's put millions of dollars into somebody who shows no accountability or responsibility for his behavior and no signs of wanting to change. I think that'll scare some people off also, unless it's a situation where he can help them win in the playoffs and get them deep towards the Super Bowl or something like that. Either way, like I just said, talent trumps trouble, and he's still a talented player. And he's going to be signed at some point, either by the end of this year or definitely by the beginning of next season.
I have to agree with Rick. I think that it's a potential value play as, what was it, 2-1, basically, plus 200. I think that he's going to find himself somewhere once assuming he's not serving jail time, assuming that there is not a felony on his record for the investigations that are going on. I don't see any reason why some team wouldn't throw a line out there and try to sign him next year, because some team is going to make that decision to go for it that they think that they can either handle him or help him or whatever. The Dolphins might do something like that. If they end up drafting a quarterback first overall, to be like, oh, we're going to give our quarterback a receiver. Because the Dolphins are the kind of team that seems to be run that like the way that they would go after an Antonio Brown to help a young quarterback. I think that there's going to be someone somewhere. Jerry Jones in Dallas might go after a guy like him, because we've seen the players that he's willing to sign that the rest of the league's not, including one who's currently an MMA fighter. So we've seen it in the past where NFL players who have gotten into significant legal troubles that everyone looks at and goes, there's no way this person is going to be let back in the league. There's no way that after a dogfighting conviction that Michael Vick will ever play football again. There's no way that after Greg Hardy does what Greg Hardy did that any NFL team would ever consider signing him. And yet they did, and pretty quickly. Once Vick was out of jail, prison, whatever it was, he signed with a team pretty quickly. Greg Hardy landed with the Dallas Cowboys very quickly. It's not Adrian Peterson, with the stuff that he ran into was it his kid, found a team very quickly. He was suspended, I think, but that was basically it. I don't think that there's a reason to think, other than if Antonio Brown wants to sign with the team, I don't think that there's any reason to think that a team, one of 32, won't sign him once this court case is dealt with, assuming that he's not in jail. That would be it.
Can get caught on tape paying for sexual services in a massage parlor and not even get punished by law, don't even get in trouble with the league, can still run his team and act like he's have an impeccable reputation, which, by the way, the only thing I even like that Brown has done in the last couple of years is calling out Rapist Burger and Robert Kraft. Both of them clear, scandalous individuals with very low morals, in my opinion. But Kraft himself, caught on tape, legit, and no issues. Come on now. Brown will be back in the league.
Let's jump over to college football for a prop bet. This one focusing on the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan lost an ugly one last week to Wisconsin. Head coach Jim Harbaugh officially on the hot seat. Rick, will Harbaugh return to Ann Arbor to coach the Maize and Blue in 2020?
This is a close one, okay, because we're not towards the end of the season, so we still have some tough games. They still got to play Penn State, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Notre Dame. Fortunately for them, other than the Penn State one, all those other games are at home, so they have a good shot there. Yeah, Harbaugh has been terrible on the road against ranked opponents. He's been terrible against Ohio State, hasn't won yet. He hasn't done well against Michigan State. He hasn't done well against Notre Dame. Like, everything's stacked against him in terms of winning the big ones. But if you look at it, he's like 26-11 in the Big Ten, and he's 40-16 or something like that overall record. If they let him go or fire him, unless he has a losing season or loses like 5 or 6 games or something like that where they don't even make a bowl game, you can't fire him right now. You would set this program back at least 4 or 5 years. Look where they were before they got Harbaugh. They were not a good team at all. They were a laughingstock of the Big Ten again. After being up high, they got knocked down so low. It took Harbaugh coming in. He's a great recruiter. He's got, connections with the NFL. He's a good coach when he has enough talent around him. Right now, they're playing below expectations. I think they need to bring him back. They'll be on the hook for $15 million if they fire him. They have nobody else that it will be better than him, even remotely rumored to be interested in taking the team. In the prop bet, they list David Shaw and Urban Meyer. First of all, the Urban Meyer one, I literally almost spit water out my nose. I was laughing so hard. And that David Shaw, why would Shaw leave Stanford where he has a better shot of winning the Pac-12 in the next couple of years than winning the Big Ten with Michigan in the next couple of years? Like, it would be a dumpster fire if they got rid of Harbaugh right now. They do not have a system in place that could help them continue to be a competitive program moving forward. You have to stick with Harbaugh unless he has a complete losing season, and then it's like, okay, you throw your hands up because there's nothing you can do about it. But if he goes 9-4, which is perfectly possible this year, then how are you going to fire him? He's never had a losing season yet. His worst record was 8-5. 3 out of 4 years, he's had 10 wins. Yes, he hasn't beat Ohio State, but come on now. 90% of the college football teams would take that winning record, even in the Big Ten. Seriously.
Yeah, I think we kind of get caught up, or some people do, in a prisoner of the moment type thing. Like, they just had that ugly loss, so then that means he must be fired before next season. I agree with you. I don't think it's necessarily the case, mostly because I don't know who they'd get to replace him. There's just no one out there that is going to be jumping all over themselves to take the Michigan job right now. You know, Les Miles is at Kansas, and I don't know if Les Miles would even be an upgrade over Jim Harbaugh to begin with. There's no real reason to think he suddenly forgot how to coach. Over the last couple of years, he succeeded everywhere he went before. He's been relatively successful at Michigan. You know, not beating Ohio State. Most teams don't beat Ohio State. I know that's how people judge Michigan coaches, but it's a little bit ridiculous. Yeah, the Urban Meyer thing is absurd, of course, just because I think he's going to go to USC, and I would bet on that if I could. There's, like, no way he doesn't, because he took time to be with his family, and he'll be back next year with USC, no doubt. But, yeah, I don't think they're going to fire him. I understand the panic that Michigan fans may be experiencing, but it's a little bit premature, I think.
Before I get into my thoughts on Harbaugh, I have to mention the Meyer stuff, because it's very funny for me as someone who was at Florida State when Urban Meyer was the coach at Florida and who saw him try to leave to take time with his family twice. He left UF for the first time for like a week for like health issues or time with his family, whatever it was, got a raise, came back, then lost to Florida State for the first time as a coach, and then left to spend time with his family, immediately took a job with ESPN, and a year later, whatever it was, ended up at Ohio State. To see friends of mine who are Ohio State fans who believed in their heart of hearts that no, he was actually going to retire. He's not going anywhere. Ohio State was his dream. That was all he ever wanted. And I'm like, no, he's going to have a bad recruiting class where something's going to happen. He's going to step down. He's going to leave for a year. He'll go to ESPN or he'll be a broadcaster for a year. And then he'll end up going to another school and he'll do the same thing. Urban Meyer coaches for 5 years, 6 years at a time and leaves because he either burns a bridge, something gets uncovered, or he loses his ability to recruit after a few years. He just takes it easy and coasts a little bit and then leaves for a different job. So that's going to be hilarious because I agree with you. USC seems like a prime landing spot for Urban Meyer, and they'll enjoy him for 3 years, hate him for 2 years later when he ends up somewhere else. But as far as Harbaugh goes, I agree with you guys that it's an overreaction to seeing a bad loss to Wisconsin and to say that, oh, well, he's got to be fired now. But when you don't beat Ohio State, when you don't win big games, college football coaches going 9-3 at a major program, that's not a good record. 9-3 means you lost every game that meant anything. 9-3 means that you beat the teams you were supposed to beat, you beat teams who are above average, and you lost to everyone who was worth anything. That's what a 9-3 record is in college football for basically any conference and most any division. Some of them you have to be 10-2 to do that. But what I could see is that there is going to be a time, and I don't know if it's going to be the end of this year, but if they lose to Penn State, if they lose to Ohio State, it might be this year that Harbaugh goes because you have to put out one big win. You've got to do something when you're at a major program like Michigan. Getting them back to being a good team isn't enough. You've got to prove that you can be great. And I don't think that Harbaugh has gotten his team to a point yet where you've always gone, they're on the verge. They're this close, but they always come up short. And sometimes when they come up short, like against Wisconsin, they really come up short. They come up ridiculously short. So I don't know if it'll be this year, but if I found good odds on it, I might take Harbaugh to leave Ann Arbor at the end of this year. And if he loses to Penn State, or if he loses one more big game this year, if the next big game that's on the schedule, which I don't know what it is for the Wolverines, but if they lose that one by more than one touchdown, then I would say this is his last year. All right, let's shift into a segment we're calling Whose Season is Over. We're entering week 5 of the college football season. Some teams with big postseason hopes are already standing on thin ice, or might even be on the outside looking in already. Taylor and I, along with Jim Avilia, provide plenty of college football betting picks each and every week in our show Power 5 Picks. Make sure to check that out on the channel or by clicking the little info button in the top corner of your screen now. If I get my directions right, I think it's that corner of the screen. Rick, which team or teams jump out as either being done when it comes to postseason potential or are at the very least on the verge of it this weekend?
Last weekend we talked about, my big one was Notre Dame, and I pretty much think they're done because, they can't win a conference championship. This week, I have 2 teams. One is Virginia. They play at Notre Dame this weekend, and I think Notre Dame's going to win. And Virginia pretty much needs to go undefeated and win in their conference and stuff to even have a shot of being in the top 10 in the ranks and stuff like that. They're top 20 right now. I think they're 18th, but they're not going to win on the road at Notre Dame. This is one of their biggest football games in recent memory that I can think of. The other one is one of the teams that I typically root for, Cal, Berkeley. They're playing Arizona State, and Cal, has surprised people going undefeated and moving up to 15th in the standings. But Arizona State, I love what they did at Michigan State when they pulled off that upset. Herm Edwards is a great coach. They've got a feisty team, a strong defense. They did have a little bit of a letdown when they just lost to Colorado. Otherwise, they would be undefeated as well and probably ranked. But that just means this loss that Cal's going to have is even more hurtful for them. As much as I would like to see Cal run away and take the Pac-12 conference, this is the beginning of the end of those dreams for anybody that's down in the Bay Area, down in Berkeley, enjoying some of that herbal stuff, thinking that Cal Berkeley is going to be the best team in college football.
Hopefully no one actually thinks that. Notre Dame, I don't think they're done yet. I don't think a close loss at Georgia dooms them. And I think, obviously they can't win a conference, but they are Notre Dame. And I think that outweighs a lot of other factors that the committee may have for other lesser teams that aren't as well thought of as a team like Notre Dame just because of their prestige and all that stuff. But if they lose to Virginia at home or even have a, kind of a nail-biter win, I think they will be done. Another team is Washington. They're playing USC this weekend at home. Washington's looked great lately since their loss. But, USC has kind of been up and down. USC is capable of beating them. But, I don't think the committee is going to look favorably upon that loss to Cal, even if it was weather-related and kind of fluky. I think a loss is going to just be a loss. And I think a Pac-12 team like that probably had to go undefeated to get in. At most, you can lose one game, and it's good that it was early in the season. So if Washington storms their way through the rest of the schedule, wins the Pac-12 and all that, they have a chance. But if they barely beat USC, or if they lose, of course, they're definitely toast.
So I've got 3 teams who I think were not done a week ago that are done now. Going back to our previous topic, Michigan. I don't think that they're going to be in the college football playoff. And when you're the Wolverines, that means that you have failed them the season, especially at this point in Harbaugh's tenure. The Wolverines are done. They lost to Wisconsin dramatically. I don't see them winning out anyway, but that for me that pushes them aside from the playoff conversation. UCF is a team that probably wasn't going to get into the college football playoff anyway. And we have seen teams that have lost to Pitt in the regular season in the last few years make the college football playoff. It happened to Clemson a couple of years ago, I believe, where they lost to Pitt during the regular season. But UCF doesn't play enough down the line to make that worth it. Maybe, again, 2020 check in on the Knights, but they're done for the year. Texas A&M, they are the first team in the SEC West to officially bite the dust, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to contending for Bama's throne. Alabama's still in it. LSU's still in it. Auburn's still in it. A&M was the only other one that was going to be contending. They lost to Auburn. Texas A&M is done. The Aggies, goodbye. See you. Thanks for playing. We will see you next year. Because there's nothing the Aggies can do in my mind that would get them into the college football playoff. And for me, that's kind of what defines a season being over, is when you have those types of expectations and you're already out of it at this point after 4 weeks. Let's move over to combat sports here. We're going to begin in boxing, where Los Angeles is the site of a monster pay-per-view on Saturday night. 3 title fights. Rick Rockwell's got a preview of the full card online gamblingsites.org, but let's break down the top 2 title fights here. First up, David Benavidez challenging Anthony Dirrell for his WBC super middleweight championship. Benavidez, a former champion who had to vacate his belt or was stripped of it after testing positive for cocaine. Dirrell won the belt after Benavidez was stripped of it. Benavidez, a whopping minus 875 favorite to take his title back. Dirrell, a plus 625 underdog to retain the championship and prove that he should have it instead of Benavidez. Rick, who do you like for this championship match?
Oh, I'm all in on Benavidez. I think he's going to be a superstar of the sport. I will give Dirrell he's worthy of a flyer. He's a veteran. He's a tough fighter. He's gritty, and he's a champion. And he's fought for 3 different belts before. So it's like, or multiple titles before. He's been around. He's been in this game for a while, and he's got a little bit more experience at a higher level of competition than Benavidez does. Benavidez is 22. He's like a dozen years younger than his opponent, but he's got a lot of talent. He's got size. He's got speed. He's got the IQ inside the ring. Listen, he let his success go to his head, and because of that, he got into trouble outside of the ring, partied too much. Wasn't like he went and beat a woman like some of these other athletes we've talked about on the show already, or done anything like that. He partied too much, got popped in a drug test, and suffered the consequences. He wasn't able to fight, and he lost his title. So he's taken this as an opportunity to really come back bigger, stronger, faster, smarter, more aggressive, hungrier. He's saying all the right things. I think he'll go in there. I don't think he's going to be able to stop Dirrell here, but I do think he should be able to get a unanimous decision. I think he'll take most of the rounds if he can just, fight his game and kind of look for an opening instead of trying to force things, because he's not going up against somebody that he can just force into his game plan. He's going to have to work at it. I think he'll get it done. Odds makers obviously think he'll get it done. He's got all the potential in the world. We're looking at a potential superstar if he can continue on this trajectory.
Yeah, there's obviously not much value in betting on Benavidez to win the fight outright. He has the 12-year age advantage. Dirrell has an experience advantage, but neither of these guys has really fought someone that's top tier necessarily to this point. Dirrell, I've also seen has mentioned retirement a time or two, which kind of makes me wonder if his head is really in this at all. But yeah, like Rick was saying, the odds aren't really such that you can really take Benavidez with, much hope for profit. So I would take him to win, but I don't think I'd be betting on it at those odds.
What I would consider because of that, though, is you could take Benavidez, as Rick said, to win by decision, and maybe find better odds that way. If you think he's going to finish in a certain round, then you go for that. But to bet on the fight lasting, going the full length and getting Benavidez to win, that might make it actually financially worth the bet. But yeah, sometimes these boxing odds, minus 875, I just look at it and go, I would never. That's not worth it to me to go, have to risk basically $9 to get $1 back in return. That's just not, unless that's the way that you're saving money and not having to pay for the pay-per-view. If you need to have a ticket to sit in a sports book to watch the fight, then it becomes worth it, because then you could bet the cost of the pay-per-view and sit back and watch. But that's, I think you could probably pay a $5 cover at a sports bar or something like that at that point. But anyway, let's move to the main event. It's Errol Spence Jr. taking on Sean Porter in a fight to unify the IBF and WBC welterweight championships. Spence is a minus 800 favorite with Porter a plus 550 underdog. Taylor, who leaves LA with all the gold?
This is a lot like the other fight. Porter might try to muck the fight up a little bit, just kind of make it ugly. But Spence has the age, the strength, and the size advantage here. I don't really think we get a knockout. I think Spence can take this via decision or TKO. But, yeah, I don't think – obviously the outright result is not something you want to be betting on, just like the other one.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chatter calling this a 50-50 fight because Porter is another rugged fighter who puts the pressure on his opponents, who tries to rough them up. As Taylor just said, muck it up. He gets in there. He gets in the proverbial phone booth, and he turns it into an ugly fight. That's, it's a classic example of dirty boxing. He gets in there, and he makes it really physical. However, Spence does have the boxing skills and the athleticism to keep the distance, to counter Porter's pressure and pace. Spence really impressed me with his IQ in his last fight against Mikey Garcia, who was a 4-division champion and a stud in his own right. Obviously, there was a huge size difference, but Spence outboxed him. He didn't just use his size difference to just maul him. He flat out outboxed him for like 11 of the 12 rounds. It wasn't even close. It was a marvelous job. I think this is one of those fights where we see Spence's stock rise even more. Like, you need good challengers to bring out the best in you sometimes, and I think Porter is going to bring out the best in Spence here. I do think Spence takes it in decision, so there were some prop bets that asked, will it go to the distance, and I think it was like minus 175 if it goes to the distance. That's better. There's some prop bets on whether or not Spence will win via decision, and that's a better odds. So you get better odds when you look at those props, which I've listed them in my preview of this whole event. But for me, I'm really excited for this fight. You got two solid champions trying to – this is what boxing should be about. This is what it used to be about. Champions fighting champions to be the best, to collect all the gold, to clean out the division, and prove you are, without a doubt, the undisputed champion. And I think Spence is well on his way to do that. He's going to take this title, and he's going to look at the rest of the landscape, and he's going to go after those belts too.
I think you guys said it all. Again, for this one with those odds, it comes down to the prop bet. Take either a round for a finish or that it goes the distance on it, because I think the favorite takes home the win in this one as well. UFC's in Copenhagen this week, where they're hoping to avoid a repeat of last week's main event craziness. As someone who was there, it was a pretty scary situation after Herb Dean had to call off the main event between Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stephens after Rodriguez caught Stephens in the eye with a poke, and Stephens was unable to open his eye for at least 5 minutes. Fans at the Mexico City Arena proceeded to throw beer, coins, and food down at the octagon and directly at Stephens as he was hurried to the back. This week's fight card hails from Copenhagen, Denmark. You can find a full betting breakdown of the fight card online at gamblingsites.org in an article. Rick Rockwell always taking care of that for us every week. Headline bout is a middleweight contest between Jack Hermansson and Jared Cannonier. The Killer Gorilla, Cannonier, a plus 200 underdog against Jack the Joker. That's why Rick's pointing at his shirt. Who is a minus 240 favorite to get the win. Rick, you keep pointing at the Joker on your shirt. Are you picking Jack to pick up the W?
Without a doubt. I've said this before. He's one of the fighters I really like. I root for. I'm not going to put him on the same level as, like Uriah Faber and stuff, my favorite, and Cowboy Cerrone. But he's one of my fave fives in the UFC right now. You can throw the boogeyman Ferguson in there also. With that said, he's got a well-rounded game in the all-around skills to win this fight. Killer Gorilla, I love that nickname. Like, it's hilarious, and it's fitting because he really is a beast. He was a heavyweight that came down to middleweight, basically. And so he transformed his body and his game. However, he's older. He hasn't been winning as much in recent years as he did prior. The Joker has gone on at least a 4-fight win streak. He's been clearing out, each person along the way to move up in the ranks. He's 5th. Killer Gorilla's 9th. We're looking at a possibility of the Joker winning. Well, I think he'll win this fight. But not only that, earning a future title shot. The problem is the middleweight division is backed up with title contenders. Costa, who just won it, earlier this month or last month over Romero, he's #1 contender right now. Then you've got, the the loser of the Whitaker Adesanya fight. Like, you've got so many top fighters ready to come out and contend for the belt. It's muddied the waters. So who knows what's going to happen next? I will tell you this, though. I think the Joker's going to get this, and I would not be surprised if he wins in the first round. He said that's his goal, is to go out there, finish his fight in the first round. When I looked at their stats, Joker has 2 first-round wins in the UFC already, and Killer Gorilla has 4 first-round losses in his career. So there is a possibility that Joker can get this done in the first round. Either way, I'm picking him to win. I have no doubt about it. I think he's too well-rounded of a fighter for Killer Gorilla to beat.
Yeah, I think Cannonier's only real path to victory is via knockout. I don't really think that's very likely to happen. I think Hermansson's just too good for him. I don't really need to add much more to this. The longer the fight goes on, I think the more it favors Hermansson. So I will take Hermansson.
Yep, I'm just gonna make that one unanimous too. Joker. Yeah, he should win this fight. I mean, Rick basically took all of that. So, that's why he's our MMA expert on this panel here. NASCAR races on Sunday afternoon this week in Charlotte. It is the Bank of America Roval 400. Martin Truex Jr., the betting favorite to win at plus 300, followed by Kyle Busch at plus 500, Chase Elliott plus 700, and then 3 drivers posting plus 800 odds to win. Interesting layout for this week's track here, of course. And after the race, the playoff field will be trimmed from 16 to 12. Taylor, who do you like to win this weekend, and which drivers do you think are going to be eliminated from Cup contention on Sunday?
I like Kevin Harvick to win this week, 14-1. I'm seeing is pretty good value for a guy that's second in the standings right now. I think he'll bounce back and knock Martin Truex off the perch a little bit. The guys I think will be eliminated, Eric Jones, I think he has to win the race outright to advance, so that's not happening. Clint Boyer has surged over the last few weeks. I think he has a chance to overtake William Byron. So I think Byron misses. I think Ryan Newman and Kurt Busch also miss out.
This is only the second time they've run this course. Last year, they unveiled this road course at Charlotte, which Charlotte is, one of their prestigious, revered annual tracks. So the Roval, oval road course, that's how they came up with that name. Very creative, brilliant. As they used to say in the WWE, wonderful. With that said, Ryan Blaney won this last year. And, he's down towards the bottom of the top 12. And if he gets this win, it'll be a lot of momentum. I'm not going to give him the win, but I'm going to say keep an eye on him because anything can happen in a road course. It really takes great pit stops, where you start, and then the driver cannot make any mistakes. This is the 3rd road course on the year. And so usually when that happens, you got to look back at what's gone on already on road courses. Truex and Chase Elliott have looked dominant over the last couple of years in road courses. Last week I said Truex wasn't going to win. I put him hey, before I get all the hate mail and hate tweets and hate whatever, Truex is my favorite race car driver, okay? So just settle down for a second. Drew, settle down, Drew. Seriously, though. He never won back-to-back races before in his career. That's the first time he's done it. So how are you going to bet on it to happen if he's never done it before? It was a surprise to everybody, including himself. Now we're talking him sweeping the whole first round of playoff races. That's insane. Like, that would be crazy. I would love to see it happen. I'm not going to bet on it, though. I am actually leaning towards Chase Elliott. I like his odds. I don't think he has the same pressure on him as maybe someone like Kyle Busch, who hasn't won in going on almost 4 months now. Chase Elliott dominated at Watkins Glen back in June, I think it was, or July. He dominated it. That's the 2nd road course of the year. He led 90% of the laps. He was clearly the best car. He can drive the road courses. This is another road course. Playoffs. He's a really good young driver. He's the best young driver in all of NASCAR. He's the future of this sport, in my opinion. And I'm can't believe I'm going to say it. I'm not going to take Truex again. I'm going with Chase Elliott to win.
Should I still be calmed down?
Calm down, Drew.
Okay. Yeah, Bank of America Roval. I'm guessing it's Roval, the Bank of America Roval 400, because it's it would make sense, road oval. So yeah, the course looks interesting. So I'm, you know, and the fact that it's new, it's hard to basically assign a favorite to something like that. So I'm going to trust you guys on that one as far as that goes. Although just because this way I can say it if it happens, my pick's Martin Truex Jr. for this week. Just because anytime that I know that Rick kind of wants to do a pick or really doesn't want to do a pick, that's just going to be my pick because why not? Martin Truex Jr. to win the Bank of America Roval 400. That's the way it goes. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Calm down, Rick. Make sure to check out gamblingsites.org, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check back next week for another edition of the podcast. They've been Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Thank you so much for watching. Taylor, calm down a little bit. We'll see you next time. You're up here. Down here.